Welcome on in to the Wolverine.com podcast. It's a Balas and Skene show. It should be Skene and Balas show for being honest here. But you know what? I don't know. It's in my contract. So anyway, we are back, and I'm Chris Balas. With me, Doug Skene, Michigan's 5-time Big Ten champion. And you know what, Skene, great stuff really in a lot of areas on Saturday. Michigan's first win over ECU. It was clunky at times, which you kind of expect from an opener at times, but at the same time, you know what, you take a win. So first things first, before we get to that, though, I want to thank our sponsor, Home Field Apparel. And let me call them up here. Home Field is a premium collegiate apparel brand based in Indianapolis. Commitment to creating incredibly comfortable, officially licensed apparel with vintage college designs. Growing collection of over 150 plus colleges to choose from, including your favorite teams, including Michigan. I'm wearing it right now, as you can see. Great stuff. I love the, in fact, Skene, they sent us a Rose Bowl Champions 1992 shirt, which was pretty awesome. I'm going to get you one of those. I think you're still probably a double XL, if I'm not mistaken. So,
yeah, you can put me down for it too.
All right, but it was awesome and just really cool stuff. When I got it, I thought, I can't wait to show Skene. I will wear it next time. So, but they've got dedication to the archives and history of each school. Discover unique logos, mascots, iconic moments to create thoughtfully designed apparel. Authentic nostalgia of the designs, perfect for showing off your team pride as college football returns. So again, man, the 1992 long sleeve was fantastic. Can't wait till it cools down a little bit so I can wear that. I love the brand's attention to detail, and really the 92. You know, it brought me back, buddy. It really did. So,
yeah. That was only 31 years ago.
Oh, God help me. So I still think I have a Big Ten champion shirt from that era. So, but it's homefieldapparel.com, folks. Homefieldapparel.com. And the code Wolverine23 is good for 15% off any first order with Home Field. Again, it is homefieldapparel.com. You get good stuff like this that I wore this weekend when I went with some friends. So, Skene, I'm going to make sure you get one because that was a great memory for me, man. It's hard to believe it was that long ago, but I lived vicariously through you guys, and I lived and died. Sometimes I felt like some of us almost cared more than the guys that played in the game, or you know, took it harder.
Well, you know, it's easy to do that now.
Yeah.
A lot of us former players feel the same way, and we want what we had when we were there for these young men. And the last two teams in this seasons have done it. Of course, the playoff picture is a little bit different now than what we had, but we desperately want these guys to win, to hang more banners in the building down there, that every former player you ever talk to will want the same thing.
Yeah, and they're getting there, buddy. It's gotten back to that 1992 feel. So let's talk a little bit about the game on Saturday. My expectations going in, I thought, okay, number one, with the new rules, you know, they aren't stopping the clock on first downs, that we were going to see less plays, and we did. I didn't like it. I hate it. Screw the rules makers. I want more football, not less. We'll talk about that in a minute. Number two, I thought J.J. McCarthy was going to be really, really good, and guess what? He exceeded, my expectations. I did think the running game would be better. At the same time, in talking to you, you know, when they were rotating the tackles in Skene, and Drake Nugent, his first game as center at Michigan after playing at Stanford last year, Miles Hinton, I thought, looked a little bit clunky. And Carson Barnhart at left tackle has some work to do. Your overall thoughts on the offensive line and the running game, which to me was a little bit of a disappointment.
Well, the first series, right? So, you know, you get a stop and they punt the football. And it's, you know, rule number one is a punt receiver, catch the football. So we start off and, you know, 1st and 10 from your own 2. And I think we got maybe a yard before we punted. And here comes, it was like a flashback for me, Balas. Linebackers darting. As soon as they see double teams, linebackers are coming, and there's guys loose in the backfield, and Corum or Edwards had nowhere to go, and all of a sudden we're punting out of our own end zone. So that was disappointing. But overall, the feeling that I had was, okay, having been there, done that, although 31 years ago, the first game it's not the same as any practice that Coach Harbaugh and his staff have put together. Game speed cannot be replicated in practice. So you just expect there's going to be a little clunkiness. There's going to be a little bit of fit and finish kind of things that are going on out there that aren't as clean as they will be in a month from now. And you're rotating in some tackles. You got Barnhart, who was used to being a right tackle guy. Now he's a left tackle guy in real life game speed. So none of that surprised me. None of that was like, okay. But Michigan's offensive line is talented enough that they did enough at times that was needed to move the football. I thought pass protection was average to be pretty good. Of course, the quarterback was outstanding, but we'll get to that in a second. But Nugent in center, I thought, he's not the physical guy that Olutimi was. He's not as tall and as long. But I see this guy and I'm like, yeah, okay, I can see this. He again, I think we talked about in a previous podcast. He kind of maybe fits the Jeff Saturday kind of physical nature, maybe 6'2", little shorter guy, but that doesn't mean you can't be effective in there. So I guess the point that I would say, Balas, is none of this alarms me. None of this makes me concerned, right? I think Hinton, I know Hinton in that game there got a guy off. He had a one-on-one off the edge. He slowed his feet down, bent at the waist, give up a pressure. But JJ steps up, delivers the football, and off we go. So you don't see that kind of thing and registered as a sack, but it was a pressure. And so on that, score sheet that right there for Hinton, that's a negative. And those kind of little things, it's like week one. So none of it was all that surprising. I would call the Michigan offensive line in week one average, and that's okay. That's okay for week one. Now, in 2 or 3 weeks from now, average is not going to be good enough. You got to get better. And the cliches about week 1 to week 2 impressive or improvements, those will absolutely come along. And then whatever rotation Coach Moore's got going on with that group at the tackle position, that'll solidify here after the second game. And I would think by the third game going into the Big Ten season, we'll have a lineup that's set.
Yeah. How much of the rotation in camp with the tackles working with the ones is going to hinder the progress? And I'm not making any excuses for them, but I've heard it so many times and I've seen it so many times with lines that play together forever, like the last couple of years, like yours in the early 90s, of guys that are so familiar with what one another are going to do that, man, you kind of know your every move. So a couple of these guys just got here, right? They didn't practice.
Yeah.
So, at least 2 of them, so it takes time, right, to gel. So it's one of those things where, your expectations were maybe a little bit too high in the opener, but by game week 3, week 4, this thing could be really humming.
It will be fine. So imagine your left guard or right guard. You're Keegan or your center. You're a veteran in there. You're the solid starter. You've been there, done that, and Barnhart played a lot of football last year for Michigan. So it's not a matter of capability. It's a matter of comfort and reps together. And so the point that you made just a moment ago is valid in that it just takes a moment or two and a week or two for things to kind of settle in. And the coaching staff makes their evaluations based on practice reps and game reps obviously being pretty important. And then by week 2 or 3, they've set a lineup. And then there's sort of this feeling in the room like, okay, everybody got their shot. We know who the starting 5 is. We know who the next tackle in the game is. We know who the next guard in the game is. If someone gets hurt at center, if Nugent gets hurt at center, who's the next guy in? That's all declared and it's on the board. There's no more questions. There's no more battles. We know what the lineups are going to be. And that's when you'll see the offensive line kind of come together and feel like, okay, this is the deal. And now I know where you're going to be on this pass protection. And we can talk about things. If things go well, we can talk about things. If things don't go well, and you do that every day, and you break down the practice film and the game film, and it'll all just settle in. This is absolutely an expectation. We've seen it now since Coach Moore has been coaching this offensive line. In another 2 or 3 weeks, everything's going to calm down, and we should see far more consistency out of this offensive line, and everything will be fine.
How much concern that there wasn't as much push as maybe we expected? We saw down there in the red zone. Well, 2 things. Number one, we could see it. I could see it with the naked eye that ECU was not going to let Michigan run the ball. They had 11 guys running downhill at the snap. And when I asked Blake Corum about it, I said, were they filling those gaps? Kind of like TCU did a really nice job with that and slowing down the Michigan run. And I said, and he said, boy, were they ever. And he said he'd never seen anything like that. So that's number one. But number 2, even in those times, like down at the goal line, it didn't seem like they were getting the same push that they got last year. Now, 2 things on that. You talked about Olutimi. That's a big dude. That guy was able to get some push, and it's going to be a little bit tougher for a smaller guy like Nugent because he doesn't have the poundage behind him, number one, as strong as he is. It's all about leverage, and I understand that. But it certainly helps. It certainly helps when you got a 320-pounder pushing compared to a 290-pounder. Number 2, the first 15 plays of each half are scripted. So that kind of threw things, I thought, on the first series when you're backed up. It didn't surprise me that they ran 3 times. I thought maybe they'd get 1 throw in there, but it seemed pretty clear to me that they were being on the conservative side, knowing that if something were to go wrong, and one of the only ways that this was going to be a ball game was if they made a big mistake down there.
Well, so the point you made about scripted opening series and second series being scripted is absolutely valid. We used to do that 30 years ago. Here's the plays we're running no matter what, and you sort of feel your way into a football game. And you've got East Carolina there selling out to stop the run, and it looked very similar, like I said earlier, of the TCU blueprint, which was as soon as those linebackers saw double teams, they were throwing gaps, they were darting gaps. And you got defensive linemen moving. This causes some challenge for guys that are trying to double team dudes. But, even so, the technique maybe wasn't all that clean. You got rotating guys. It's game speed. Everybody's amped up to a new level that they haven't had since last year. All these things combined makes it look a little clunky out of the gate. We kind of go, oh, wait a minute. I thought Michigan's offensive line was going to dominate from snap one to the end of the game. That's not necessarily how it goes. And you can go back over all the course of Michigan football history or any other offensive line in the history of college football that was at the end of the season great, at the beginning of the season maybe not so great, maybe average at times. And that's exactly what we saw Saturday in this football game. And so, again, Nugent may not have the physical stature as Olotimi did, but it doesn't mean he can't be as effective. Michigan has had centers that are a couple inches shorter, but just as effective. Of course, ideally, you want a 6'5" guy in there that's got long arms that can pass pro like a guard or tackle, but you don't have that. But it doesn't mean you can't be effective, and he will be. Yeah. So none of this concerns me again, Balas. I don't get too worried about it. And the first series, I thought, that was kind of gross, but okay, whatever. We end up winning the football game, and then we flip the script and we say, okay, so they sold out to stop the run. Well, great, super. What happened then? Well, our quarterback showed the kid's a stud. Mm-hmm. And we had some dudes downfield. We got a tight end. We got a slot guy. We got a wide receiver guy who's making plays everywhere. And what we talked about going into the season, Michigan must have to be better at, which was a more dynamic passing game, as I've said more time and time again now. There were certainly flashes of that. So it's like, okay, fellas, this is encouraging. Of all the things, I'm not going to get too excited, and I'm not drinking your blue Kool-Aid yet, Balas, because the Kool-Aid dispenser starts.
Mr. 12-0.
Yeah.
who's handing out the Kool-Aid this year?
Well, there's expectations, but I'm not going to get too excited about what we've seen here, certainly in week one. But I will say that watching that quarterback move around in that pocket, keeping his eyes up and downfield, and instead of looking at his pass protection, feeling it and moving around in the pocket and slinging that football on a dime, it's like, okay, we got a stud here at quarterback. Clearly, we have a stud at quarterback. How do we keep this kid healthy through the course of a football season? Clean up that pass protection so he doesn't have to move around as much. And if this is a flash of what we're going to see throughout the course of the season in this passing offense, then this changes the game for the expectations of Michigan when they get to the playoff.
Yeah, he threw 30 times, and if you told me that, I didn't think he would have thrown, 30 times in 3 quarters, essentially, and with less plays, again, which sucks. I hate it. I flat out hate it. But, all right, how about let's talk about the goal line offense there. I was just watching the Florida State LSU game, and they got cute down at the goal line. It was second goal at the 2. They threw 3 times and didn't make it. And I'm thinking, okay, you got all these people on the message boards. You got to be more creative down there and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, line up, put a fullback behind him, hand him the ball, get some push up front, get some push behind him, and get him in the damn end zone. So, no, I'm not going to blame the play calling there. They almost got in anyway. They had it overturned, but they need a little bit better push. Were guys just not getting low enough there, or what was going on?
It always comes down to the fundamentals, Balas. So it doesn't matter whether it's game one or last year against TCU. You either put your first step in the ground where it belongs, and you got to have your eyeballs down in the neck of your opponent so you get that geometric leverage there as a blocker. And if you're above the other guy's shoulder pads, you're a problem. You're a problem on the play. It's not any more complicated than that. And so if you're taking the right step and your eyes are at the level they need to be, which puts the rest of your body at the level that it needs to be, you're probably going to dramatically increase your chances of success. So again, week one, we're up against a defense that's selling out to stop the run and make Michigan do certain things. And they sell out down there inside the 10-yard line, which I've said now for as long as you and I have been doing this, the game changes inside the 20-yard line. It changes even more inside the 10, and it changes even more inside the 5. And offensive lines have to adjust to that. And even if going back years ago, has been there, done by myself, and I watch college guys play today. You come to the line of scrimmage and you got a defensive line whose face mask is 6 inches off the floor of the turf. This guy's submarining in front of me, and there's probably not a lot of room for me to move somebody. Well, then you got to audible out of that thing, or you got to find a different crease in there some way. So it's again, it could always be cleaned up. And this was criticism that you and I had last year of the Michigan offensive line at times in the red zone, down inside the 10, that we weren't low enough digging guys out. And it was a little streaky at the first part of the season and at the end of the season. But again, I have trust based on what I've seen from this offensive line coach and this group of players that this is going to be figured out. So I'm not freaking out. Now, if we have these same problems a month from now, I'm going to start raising a yellow flag up the flagpole here and say, what's going on? But I'm not too concerned. The passing offense stepped up. Roman Wilson had an incredible game. JJ had an incredible game. The tight end looks like he's going to be a future superstar. So there's a lot of things to be positive about. They'll get this other stuff figured out in the next couple of weeks.
And let's not forget that their offensive line coach was not there. Yeah. And that is kind of important. You know what? With all due respect for the guys who step in for these guys, there's a reason that the Michigan has won the last 2 Joe Moore Awards as the top offensive line in the country, because they are extremely well coached, and their head coach isn't there either. So, and those guys being on that field to encourage them, to coach them is extremely important. So I do want to get back to JJ McCarthy here. And it wasn't just the stepping up in the pocket, watching him fade back in the pocket when he kind of felt pressure coming from his right one time and throws back across his body over the middle was next level stuff. Okay. What he put on that ball and where he is throwing that ball, that touchdown pass to Roman Wilson was an NFL throw flat out. So to me, he's taking that next step. And if they have to go with him, it's a cliche, open the run to open the pass, then I'm pretty comfortable with them doing that.
Well, and they may have to, right? So the recipe, obviously the TCU blueprint, if you will, and going back to last year, Ohio State sold out to stop the run and it burned them. TCU figured out how to disrupt the run and cause a problem or two with JJ there to throw a couple of bad passes. But if JJ doesn't make those kind of galactic mistakes and throw the pick sixes, then this kid is going to beat you probably 8 or 9 out of 10 times, right? And so, he's obviously an outstanding player from what we saw from the last game last year, and he made some great plays in that TCU game. But these flashes here early are really, really encouraging. Again, in watching college football, the most important thing for me is when you're always going to have a leaker or two in a pass protection. Maybe a defense runs an effective twist or a blitz or whatever. Average quarterbacks take their eyes off of their downfield targets and their progressions, and they look down and they look at where the pressure is coming from. The elite ones can keep their eyes downfield as they're feeling things and then deliver a bullet because he's got that kind of God-given talent on that shoulder of his and that hand of his. Now you're talking about a special kind of player. And going back to what we talked about going into this preseason, I have all the confidence in this kid at quarterback. Who's the backup in case something happens to him? And when he took the targeting call in the end and he ended up flat back, then he got hit in the head, and then his head hit back on the turf. I'm like, oh my God, here we go. But of course he popped right up, which shows it's a sign of toughness and enthusiasm. I think JJ's got a bit of grit to him that we saw last year. And that play in particular, where the targeting call was made, a little more grit and toughness. And I'm telling you, when you see your quarterback make a play like that, trying to squeak out yardage, and he takes a shot like that where he gets laid out, hit in the head, his head bounces off the turf, and they're having to hold him back on the sideline from running back to the huddle and let's go again. Yeah. Man, as a teammate, that fires you up so much. You're like, man, let's go. I'm all behind this guy. And so these are all positive things, Balas, that you don't see in the stat book anywhere.
Yeah, he's something else, man. Special kid, no question about it. One of the leaders on this team. He would be a captain if they didn't have 6 captains that were upperclassmen that were seniors and fifth or sixth year guys.
Hey, listen, man, I played next to a guy named Steve Everett who wasn't officially named captain, but I guarantee everybody on that team thought he was a captain. You don't have to have the picture on the wall or the letter on your locker there, the captain's letter, the letter C there, to be a leader, and clearly he is.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Let's talk about the running backs, because a lot of people were concerned about Blake Corum. They said he looks like he's lost a step. And 2 things about that. Same with Donovan Edwards. Number one, he was hesitant because he had nowhere to run, in my opinion. I mean, he's juking a little bit, and everyone's like, well, why is he hesitant? Because those gaps filled so quickly with linebackers running downhill or safeties that there was nothing that he could do. And I thought when he got outside, he still showed that burst, and he did okay.
Yeah, there were a couple runs by both of those guys. I'm like, oh, okay, that's what we expect. But listen, when you get the football and you're having to plant your foot in the ground and adjust your path because there's someone standing at the line of scrimmage or a yard into your backfield and you have to cut there, you don't practice that in your walkthroughs. You don't plan for that. That guy's not supposed to be there. So it goes back to the part of the clunkiness and some of the leakers that we had in that offensive line. If you clean that up, then we're probably not talking about Corum or Edwards losing a step. They didn't lose a step. And so, at the same time, they're not Barry Sanders here. They can't stop and turn on a dime and be up to, all pro level speed in 2 steps. So, I'm not blaming these guys as I'm watching this football game. I'm like, yeah, he got tackled for loss or tackled for no gain there because there was a dude standing at him, staring at him at the line of scrimmage. The offensive line has to fix that, and they will.
Yep, they absolutely will. So, all right, let's go over to the defense here. And I thought they were dominant against the run. I thought that was fantastic. 2 things. I want to credit ECU, their coaching staff, for their game plan on both sides of the ball. Number one, the way they attacked the run. Who knew McCarthy would be that good? We knew he was good, but I don't think anybody, including them, expected that he would be that good. And he was outstanding. So credit them for that. And, I really making Michigan beat them with a pass, which McCarthy showed he could do. Number 2, on offense, they incorporated that quarterback draw into their offense. And one thing that Jesse Minter said, defensive coordinator, was we couldn't pin our ears back and get after them because we had to be careful about that. And I understand that. At the same time, a little bit of disappointment that we didn't see more of a pass rush. There were times that there was pressure there. But your thoughts on them versus the ECU offensive line?
Well, so the first thought that came to mind as I'm watching the football game is Coach Minter really, really releasing the whole defensive playbook here? I got a feeling that it wasn't. I got a feeling that it was like, okay, guys, we're lining up against ECU. Let's just see what our defensive line can do against their offensive line. The most dynamic thing I saw, with any regularity, was a tackle end or end tackle twist. I didn't see any dynamic blitzes or anything like that, and that doesn't surprise me at all that you're not going to display your whole playbook in week 1 against that opponent. There's a lot of other big games coming, and you do want to hold some things back. Now, Coach Harbaugh and Coach Minter and others might say that we don't do that. We take the whole playbook with us. Well, you might have done that, Coach, but I have a hard time believing it because I didn't see a whole lot of things that were super dynamic or weird out of your defensive front. It looked pretty vanilla. Now, if you just look at that and you say, okay, well, if we go to the defensive line and we say, okay, how'd you do against the ECU offensive line with a vanilla attack? Well, you probably could have been better, right? We probably could have seen a few more pressures. And I thought there was some good stuff in there. We saw Jenkins running around. Jenkins had a couple nice pressures and running guys down and causing disruption in the backfield.
Kenneth Grant was in there, forced the interception, and then got pressure in the end zone on another.
So there was streakiness. There were spots of really positive stuff out of that defensive line. Mason Graham had a really nice play early on. We're stuffing the run. Everything looked good. And again, it's like, okay, at what point in the game you kind of check your watch and go, okay, we're going to win this game. Let's move on to the next one. And we're going to feel the same way a week from now with the next opponent and the one after that until we get into October and we get into more exciting games and exciting opponents. But again, I think I told you when you and I were texting during the game with another former player, Stapleton, and I was like, hey, let's not get too excited about what we see or don't see here today. Let's just be happy with the positive that we see and the things that we maybe weren't so impressed with. I'm not worried about it at this point. This team doesn't seem to have any glaring, massive problems. When we needed to get a first down, we got a first down. When the defense needed to get a stop, they got a stop. We give up 3 points, right? We give up 3 points. So I'm not gonna bag on the defense too much because I just don't believe they were throwing everything at them.
And let's be clear here: the excitement was coming from the punter in our little group text there, nobody else. So, both ways, which, you know what, go figure. So let's talk about I want to go back and talk about the pass blocking too. I forgot to ask you about that, the Michigan pass blockers, the job that you thought they did. Were there some twists and stuff run at them, and how did they handle it?
Yeah, well, of course there was some easy games in there, not a whole lot. The one play that sticks out to me, I mentioned it earlier. Hinton had a one-on-one off the edge of the I think it was in the first half of the game. Michigan's moving left to right toward the south end zone there, and Hinton just gave up a bad pressure off the edge. And you can't bend your waist as an offensive tackle. You can't bend your waist. You got to keep your head back, your hands out, and your feet moving. And so if you know that play right there, I thought that's going to hurt that kid's chances of becoming regular at right tackle. And I think Trente's probably a little more athletic there than maybe Hinton is. I think Hinton physically is just obviously stands out. Maybe, all kinds of potential, but the offensive line pass blocking and the offensive line as overall, the thought that came to mind was, average for a week one. No red flags. And at the same time, no dominating, absolutely destroying someone. We had too many leakers. We had too many guys in our backfield in bad spots. And so, I kind of went, we won the game easily. Let's move on and see what happens next week. And if we have the same conversation next week, my concern level is going to go up a little bit and say, okay, fellas, this happened in the game. And, why are we not cleaning this up in week 2? So we should see far less of guys in the opposite color jersey in our backfield at our line of scrimmage, making Corum or Edwards break when they shouldn't have to break. And we should be able to get into more running lanes more cleanly. And so I would expect that if that doesn't happen, then we'll be having a different conversation next weekend.
And Sharon Moore will be on the sidelines next week to help these guys out as well, and help make adjustments. So, and I think people take for granted, the impact that Jim Harbaugh has down there too. He sees things. He's been playing football his entire life. There's a reason that he's one of the best coaches in the business and has been for so long, is because of his input on game day as well. If he sees something, maybe in a formation defensively or something like that he thinks can work, then he's going to add his 2 cents to it.
Well, I think that's a valid point, right, Balas? So Coach Harbaugh got the suspension, which you and I have talked about is ridiculous, in my opinion. And then Coach Moore's not there, and what you and I don't know is what that feeling is to be on a sideline without your primary offensive line coach and without your head coach. And I thought the football team handled it fine. We went out and performed and won a game by an easy margin. But I really don't know. What was the emotional impact on this team? Did it cause a distraction? Did it change the dynamic of how they managed things when they came off the field as an offensive line unit, and not having Coach Moore there to have that familiar voice and breaking things down? That may have been a factor that we just don't know how to measure. And so it'll be good to have him back. Absolutely.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the rest of the Big Ten, Skene. And how many games were you able to watch? Were you able to watch Michigan State, Ohio State, Penn State?
So I caught the tail end of Ohio State. I watched. I did not see Michigan State play, but I did watch Illinois play. I watched Penn State play, and I caught a little bit of Minnesota.
Okay, your thoughts? I thought Nebraska was really the better team for the most part in that Minnesota-Nebraska game. I thought their defense was aggressive.
Can you hear me still?
I can. I'm sorry. I've got some interference in the back here.
Yeah.
But I thought so. You know what? They've got a long way to go offensively, but I think that they've got some things to build on. Michigan State struggled with Central Michigan for the better part of a half and a quarter. I don't think.
It sounds like the Spartans were the quarterback looked kind of rough in the first half, but then found a groove maybe in the second half.
Right.
what I didn't get a chance to watch, which was, obviously part of the problem with the Michigan State quarterback, was how effective was their offensive line in the first half of that game.
Not good. And
it sounds like it wasn't all that good.
No, and I you know what? That's a terrible football team that they played. One of probably going to be finishing close to the bottom of the MAC. So, regardless, I thought Penn State looked pretty good. Did you watch part of that game? I thought they were physical. I think their run defense has some work to do, but overall, Penn State looked to me like one of probably the best performance of the three contenders in the Big Ten East.
Yeah, Penn State's got an outstanding left tackle. They got an outstanding defensive end. They got a strong safety that's really, really good. They got a linebacker that's really good too in there. So Penn State looks like they're going to be a threat. But I was telling some of my friends last I checked, Coach Franklin's still the head coach there. So that gives us an advantage automatically, even in week one, by the time we get to play him, because I'm never going to be impressed with that guy as a head coach. He's only as good as his offensive assistants and defensive assistants. And I've just never thought that highly of him as a head coach, game day management. But they've got players, Balas. They've got some really good players. They got a quarterback who they're, obviously making the first official start as the official guy. I know he came in some spots last year behind the veteran quarterback that they had, but
he looked good.
Yeah, he looked good, right? He looked like he understood what was going on. When they do those tight, pictures on the television, as a former offensive line, you always look at your quarterback's eyes to see, do you see panic? Do you see calm? Or do you see, follow me, I got this? And what I saw last night was a calm, for a young guy, a calm who looked like he was comfortable out there. So that's probably bodes well for them. They'll be a challenge to play because it's loud there. But, again, of all the teams, it looks like, Penn State looks like they may be, one of the more, prevalent contenders out of the gate. And everybody that's going, oh, Ohio State doesn't have a quarterback. Oh, Ohio State didn't look that good against Indiana. Pump the brakes. All right. Ohio State has football players, and they will have it figured out by the end of November. Trust me, people. So again, same thing for us. I just try not to get too excited about what we see in week one from all of these teams, because so much changes in the next 3 weeks. The best coaching staffs are going to find weaknesses in their opponents, and they're going to get things fixed there, and they're going to take advantages. And so there's going to be a lot of changes in the next few weeks, and it'll be no exception this year with any of these teams trying to win this conference championship again.
He's Doug Skene, Michigan's five-time Big Ten champion, all Big Ten offensive lineman from Michigan. Skene, I appreciate your time. We will do it again next week.
Go Blue, Balas.